All right, today is Tuesday, August 4th, and this is a post-market review for the stock market activities today. The indices closed in the green again, the Dow Industrial Average up 164 points or 0.62%. The Nasdaq is up 38.37 points or 0.35%, and the S&P 500 is up 11.90 points or 0.36%. The sector performance, we've seen a shift. Yesterday it was an offensive risk on kind of trade. Today it is a defensive trade. The outperformers are energy, materials, real estate, and consumer defensive. The laggards are healthcare, technology, and financials. Let's shift and take a look at the futures. There are important developments in the futures today. Oil continues to rally. Of course, natural gas adding to the gains, the massive gains from yesterday. And if we see coffee of course took a break yesterday but continues to march to the upside. And lumber again continuing the tear. There's no stop here in sight. And of course metals, important development in metals, specifically gold, finally breaking the psychological level of $2,000. First time in history. Silver follows the move in gold, and we see of course lean hogs gaining a little bit, and of course the laggards here, the most important laggards are grains and orange juice. Of course took a big hit today. I told you the rally in orange juice is pretty much over as the farms in Brazil continue to open. Let's take a look at the earnings picture here. Earnings update. Yesterday we saw Tyson of course rallied after earnings. They reported terrible numbers, but they changed the CEO, and that created some positive note in Tyson shares. We also had Virgin Galactic. Virgin Galactic, of course, traded down today on the heels of the earnings, down about over 12%. The reason, of course, in my earnings preview, I told you any delays will crash the stock, and here is the delay. Of course, they had their first mission, their first trip, but they're delaying it due to the economic conditions that we are in. There are slowdowns in the plans they have. However, they revealed new products. Of course, the most important one is the new jet that they claim can take you from London to New York in 2 hours, beating the previous record of the Concorde plane. As you can see in the screen, of course, we have Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean did not report on Monday. Instead, I think they will report next week. We still don't have a word from Royal Caribbean, official word. But we do have word from Take-Two, and I told you in my earnings preview that Take-Two needs to increase the net bookings and net revenue increases in the digital category quarter over quarter and year over year. They did exactly that. The earnings from Take-Two were excellent. The earnings in the video games industry in general, very good because of their stay-at-home environment. Case in point, of course, we had earnings from Sony. Sony, in all categories of their business units, of course, they're down, with exception with gaming and financials. But the growth specifically came from the gaming category, the video games category. They have specifics on the PlayStation 5. The sales for The Last of Us 2 and the Ghosts of Tsushima were really solid. And of course, that compensated for the negative tune for the pictures, Sony pictures and music, and the microchips and the rest of them. And you saw Sony shares rallying today. The earnings were negative overall, but they were better than expected due to the strength in the video games trend. Another name that reported in the morning is Emerson Electric. Emerson, of course, had bad earnings because the revenue and the net increase of revenue year over year was negative across all categories, but it was a little better than expected, and they increased the guidance for next quarter. Shares traded in the negative today, not by a lot, so we could see some optimism here, specifically with a name like Emerson has over 3% yield. Some people might feel safe investing in Emerson to catch some of that yield. And of course, after the bell today, we have Nikola, Activision, Twilio, Paycom, Disney, and Beyond Meat. We're going to take a look at these names. Of course, we have Wynn Resorts too. You don't see it in the screen because we covered MGM last week. But we will take a look before I conclude this video. I will take a look at the movement after hours. An update here, I released this tweet in Nikola trade. We had a Nikola trade yesterday, bullish call on Nikola. It was a calendar spread. I closed this trade today because the option trade almost tripled. I took the profits and I went home. Shares of Nikola trading down, but they're still around the strike price that I picked here, 35. The most likely scenario is the shorter leg will expire worthless or almost worthless, and then you're going to have the longer leg for next week. It could appreciate, but it could not. So that's why I closed the trade and just got it off my screen. We also have an announcement from Novavax. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Here is the action in the heat map. As you can see, the green boxes mostly in the defensive category, materials, energy, consumer defensives, and utilities outperformed today. Biotech, of course, as I said, because of Novavax had a trial release after hours and the stock is very, very volatile, but we know that the options market expected a big move to the downside and the options market was correct as usual. Some of the notable names here to cover on the map. The action today is Ford. Ford traded in the green today because they have a new CEO. They replaced the CEO. We'll see if that will continue in the days to come or not. Of course, they're trying to restructure the company. They have the new Bronco, which excited more momentum and more sales and reservations in the company. We know we have the Mustang Electric coming, and the F-150 continues to outperform. But this is a company that, of course, was lagging for years and years and years, remained flat and traded negative, never recovered after the financial crisis. So we'll see if they have a serious plan here to restructure the company, and we will see if they're finally going to take the stock price seriously. One of the laggards trading in the red today significantly is Diageo. Diageo, of course, reported that there are increase in the liquor sales in North America, but other territories underperformed. And because of the closures of bars, of course, they're taking a massive hit to their top and bottom lines. Now let's shift to the headlines right away. The headlines. We have, of course, an update to the Robin Hoodiots. Call them the Robin Hoodiots because all they do is follow the hot trade with no thinking whatsoever. Case in point, we know over 100,000 accounts in Robinhood added Kodak, and what do you know today? The SEC will investigate Kodak officially. The executives were awarded options before the announcement, 1 day before the announcement of the government deal. That was very shady, very obvious what was going on here. And they cashed in big after the move. And of course, the Robinhood idiots jumped into the trade and now they're buried alive. I warned you from this. I warned you that the scrutiny, because the involvement of the Trump administration in this deal, there will be partisan scrutiny from the media and from the Democratic Party. And what do you know? Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted today, this morning, asking the SEC to investigate Kodak, the Kodak deal, and the SEC did so, and the shares, of course, continued the collapse to the red territory. Another example of the Robinhoodiots geniuses, of course, they bought ADT yesterday after the stock already popped over 70% after the deal with Google. We saw the shares closing well below the highs yesterday, and now today they're continuing to trend lower and lower. Big rookie mistakes here from the Robinhood crowd. It worked for them for a while, chasing the hot trades in Hertz and Neo, etc. But now it is starting to blow in their faces. More news about government scrutiny over tech names. Twitter. The FTC is fining Twitter $250 million. And the New York Attorney General is also investigating Amazon practices during the pandemic. They're having a monopoly here, and the New York Attorney General will look at it. What about the TikTok saga? The TikTok saga continues to get uglier by the day. The Trump administration is asking, or President Trump, not the administration, him himself, asking for a payment directly from Microsoft to the U.S. Treasury. We know the slimy character who is currently leading the U.S. Treasury, and of course the looting of the U.S. Treasury continues. We saw what happened with the PPP loans. Who knows? Microsoft deposit money in the Treasury. Where will that money go? Because the slimy character who's leading the Treasury right now have absolutely no morals, ethics whatsoever. He opened the Treasury for looters to come and cash in. China, of course, responded saying that the U.S. is a rogue state for what they're doing with TikTok, and they're not going to stay silent. Here is an article, by the way, about Microsoft's history in China. It is worth reading because Microsoft has a shady history with China here. Yes, they don't have major businesses in China, but there is a connection, and this article is worth reading. Let's take a look now about the state of the economy overall, the local economy, domestic economy, specifically small business. Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, or the former CEO of Starbucks, warning that about 35 to 45% of small businesses will fail by Labor Day. And of course, the $600 unemployment benefit that you were receiving from the federal government buying video games and iPhones, well, that is gone now, officially. And we will see what will happen in the stimulus talk, of course, the circus that's going on in DC, whether they will restore the $600 unemployment or not. Of course, the argument is, why would people get paid more staying at home than going back to their jobs? This is an incentive to stay at home, not going back to work again. There is a valid argument there, but we're also in the midst of a pandemic and the jobs are not coming back anyways. So we'll see what conclusion your beloved elected politicians will come to when this whole stimulus deal is done. Speaking of unemployment, Booking Holdings laying off over 25% of their employees. We've seen the pain in Expedia last week. Booking reports this week. This does not look good. They're laying off 25% of their over 17,000 employees. That is a big, big number. Overseas in Europe, Hugo Boss, the suit maker, the fashion retailer, says that they need support to survive now because the pandemic environment hit them very hard. The retail apocalypse, of course, continues. And in the political / bazaar arena, we've seen what happened in Lebanon today, the bazaar explosion. Very, very mysterious incident. And you've seen the videos, of course, on social media. It looks like a mini nuclear bomb went off in Lebanon. It is absolutely insane. Lebanon, of course, is a state that is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, a failed state economically. We've seen the foreign minister resigning a few days ago and calling and warning that this state will fail completely. This is what happens, of course, when we don't have a central bank that you can't just print money out of thin air. You see inflation happening. The loaf of bread that you bought yesterday is now out of reach. You cannot buy it anymore because the prices increased so much overnight. And we've heard tragic stories of suicides in Lebanon, of course, because the economic condition is so dire. This is not just about Lebanon. We've seen what happened in Argentina. Argentina is being rescued again. Argentina is a failed state financially, for all intents and purposes, being rescued once again. We know what's going on with the Turkish lira. The Turkish lira continues to flush to the downside. We know what's going on in India, of course. COVID is ravaging the country. The Indian stock market is starting to pull back, and the government is racking a huge amount of debt. How long can the United States stay the shining city on a hill amidst all the darkness surrounding it? I don't think for too long. Case in point, I tweeted this tweet in the morning about the Japanese example. Japan back in the 80s had one of the biggest asset bubbles in history. And as the government started racking their debt and their debt to GDP ratio started to increase significantly, as you can see from the chart, it is well above 200% right now. But as it started to pick up in the late 80s, early 90s, the Japanese Nikkei, the stock market, crashed significantly. In 1989, Japan faced a stagnation for decades, specifically in the 90s. That's why economists call it the lost decade. The Nikkei, of course, never recovered. It's been 30 years since the crash, and it never recovered to the prior levels of 1989. This is a history lesson for those who say that stocks only go up and the United States is immune from stagnation. This is what will happen because we're racking debt in a fast level here in the US. The debt to GDP ratio is now surpassing its prior highs during the World War era and the Great Depression era. We can see a stagnation here in the US where the market crashes and stays flat for years and years, and that would be really horrible for the next generation of investors. They will not be able to accumulate wealth as previous generations did. Let's take a look at the charts. I will go into the Qs right away because all indices traded the same way So we're not going to look at the SPY. We're going to look at the Qs because the Qs is the most important chart leading the market right now. The Qs closing again decisively above the bear channel, confirming the positive move in the Qs for now. But when you look in the 15 minutes chart, there was a bizarre trading happening around 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. We've seen a big dip happening rapidly, and that dip was bought at the end of the day, and the market recovered and closed in the green. What happened around 11 o'clock Pacific, who knows? Somebody dumped, it could be insiders, who knows? But these are bizarre incidents that usually get explained later, in later days. Let's take a look at gold, the GLD index. Of course, I identified this resistance around 185.50, and once you break above the resistance, you get a big breakout, decisive breakout. This is exactly what the GLD did today. What about the VIX? The VIX closing again below my line in the sand, not by much, 2% down. But remember, August is the volatility month. I, of course, take advantage of the drop in the VIX and the muted action in the VIX for now to accumulate options positions because they're really cheap right now. I am not sure if they're going to stay cheap forever because the VIX will pop one way or the other during this month and the month to come, September. August, September are known to be the month of the VIX. The VIX moves heavily during these 2 months. Let's take a look at the dollar index chart. The dollar index now trending negative again. This is a very bearish look. More pain is coming to the dollar index. Just from a charting look, this is a reversal and the dollar will most likely trend in the red in the days and weeks to come. This is a long-term bearish trend for the US dollar. And now we're going to look at the chart that we haven't looked at before, the TNX, the Treasury 10-year yields. Down big today, over 8.5%. And you can see that we are trending lower. And the next destination is the low for March 20th. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the beginning of the march to negative rates. The US 10 years note will pay negative rates. Imagine that. Whether Fed Chairman Powell likes it or not, this is the destination we're heading in. The market is telling you that ahead of time. Finally, before we conclude, let's take a look at today's earnings. What's going on with the earnings after market? We'll take a look right away quickly. The big name, of course, is Disney. Disney is rallying over 4%. Remember that we have a bullish trade calendar options call on Disney for the 120. So that's going to appreciate, but unfortunately the lower leg will appreciate too. So you're going to have to close that, assuming, of course, Disney keeps the gains after market for tomorrow. The threshold bar for Disney was so low. I explained that to you in my pre-earnings video. I told you any little beat and surprise in the networks category or in the direct-to-consumer category will, of course, rally the shares. Threshold was so low, they surpassed it. Now you see the shares rallying over 4%. What about Nikola? Nikola, just closed my trade in Nikola, and it is down 10%. Of course, it rallied big the last few days, couple of days, Monday and today, and now it's down over 10%, as I can see from my screen. It wasn't really an earnings report. There's nothing to report here. It was just a news press release because Nikola doesn't have any products, any revenues, so there's nothing really, there's no parameter for you to base your investment decisions on beside the technicals. What about Activision Blizzard? They're not reacting the same way Take-Two did, but the conference call did not start yet, at least as the time of the recording of this video. Activision Blizzard is down 1.4%, as I can see right now. We will see what happened after the call. What about Beyond Meat? Beyond Meat is down over 6%. We're going to comb through all these earnings tomorrow. We'll look at them in details and review what happened, but down 6%, as we can see, pretty much reversing the move that it had today. Beyond Meat closed over 5.90%, almost 6%. Now it's giving that back in the after hours. What about Twilio? Twilio is reporting too. Twilio is down around 5%. Right now, as I can see from my screen at the time of the recording, we will see what happened here in Twilio. Of course, this is a high-flying name. I told you in my pre-earnings review or in my earnings preview video, I told you that Twilio is a high-flying name. The expectations is pretty much impossible to meet from the stock price itself. So even if they beat, the stock will collapse. We also have Wynn. Wynn is muted. Of course, the negative theme in Las Vegas. We've seen that from Las Vegas Sands and MGM. So it wasn't a surprise that Wynn Resorts sales and revenue will drop. As I can see here from my screen, the revenues are down over 95%. Yet the stock is pretty much muted, up 1%, because that was expected after MGM Las Vegas Sands results. Let's take a look at Novavax. Novavax reported their trial earnings. They were down over 30% last time I checked. Now they recovered to only down 5%. Very, very volatile session here in Novavax. We will see how it opens tomorrow, how it closes tomorrow. Of course, we have a call happening in a little bit about Novavax. We'll see how the shares react. And before I log off, here is the earnings for tomorrow. We have CVS. Novavax is not reporting tomorrow. Last time I checked, it was expected, but it didn't. Either way, trial result, of course, is equivalent of the earnings report because the shares are moving significantly. But we do have Carvana tomorrow, and we have Wayfair, Roku, and the biggest name, of course, is Square. How will Square square off with its valuation? They need a big beat here to surprise us to the upside. If you found the information presented in this video helpful, please subscribe, press the like button, the notification button, and follow me on social media.